Three, two, one. Hello, one and all, and welcome to the Law Student Podcast. My name is Dean, and this week we're talking about what it's like being a sports lawyer. And that light, I'm honoured to be joined by Cassandra Heilbronn, who is a current sports and entertainment regulation legal manager over in Saudi Arabia. Welcome, Cassandra.
Hi, Dean. Thank you very much for having me on.
Well, fantastic. Well, you're a Griffith graduate yourself, so if you could be so kind, could you perhaps give the listeners a quick overview about yourself and sort of your career in brief?
Sure. So I graduated from Griffith back in 2007, which seems a long time ago now. And I did a dual degree, obviously Bachelor of Laws. When I started my degrees, my second one was Bachelor of Commerce. Really interestingly, I was invited to graduate with my Bachelor of Commerce degree. But when I walked off stage, I had a Bachelor of Arts degree. Because in the middle of my studies, they actually changed the program. So it's been always a funny point of discussion when I'm talking to Kylie and Therese that I thought I was graduating with a commerce degree and ended up with an arts in politics and public policy, which was my major in commerce anyway. But Griffith, so that was 2007. And in my last year of study, I actually started working as a law clerk up at Butler McDermott Lawyers at the Sunshine Coast. It was kind of a very odd way of obtaining that job. I was at a football match and met the partner at Butler McDermott at halftime of the match and said that I was, in my last year of study looking to obtain a graduate position. I hadn't yet applied anywhere. I wasn't going through that process as yet. And the next day or 2 days later, he had me up for an interview and I started working there about 10 days after meeting him, which was absolutely fantastic. I was there for 3.5 to 4 years before moving back to Brisbane. And that's where I kind of had my base until I moved to Melbourne through an interfirm transfer when I was at Minter Ellison. And that was May 2018. I was only there for a year before I actually packed up and moved to Saudi Arabia, which was not planned as such. I always wanted to go overseas to practice, but I thought it would have been the United States as my next step. But here I am in sunny, very dust-risen desert Saudi and absolutely love it. And I've been here for just over 2 years now.
Awesome. So could you give us a bit of an overview about your current role now over there?
Sure. So it's a bit different from my practice back in Australia. First of all, I'm in-house now. I work for a government agency or an entity rather. We are a royal commission and we're tasked with developing and progressing a town here in Saudi Arabia. So my job is to work on the secondary regulations. So I've got a couple of projects that I'm working on, and we've done our benchmarking of some international jurisdictions, and now we're going through the final stages of having our regulations approved. So for me, it's a lot different to the litigation, the negotiations, and all of that world that I'm used to back in Australia. But for me, it's a very welcomed change and certainly a good challenge, particularly because I'm not dealing strictly with common law-based systems.
Yeah, awesome. So perhaps let's jump back to your Australian life, let's call it. Could you tell us about your experience? So you've gone to the Sunshine Coast, Brisbane, Melbourne. Could you tell us about the roles you've had sort of along that path?
Sure. So when I was at Sunshine Coast, I was actually plaintiff personal injury and criminal defence, so general litigation. So of a morning, I could be doing, pleas of guilty for traffic prosecutions, public nuisance, just your general criminal summary offences matters. Of an afternoon, I could be doing debt recovery or plaintiff personal injury mediation. It was a really wide practice, and I always say I would never swap that for any other type of training available. It was good. It was very busy. I had client contact from day one as a law clerk, and then when I graduated uni, my title changed to trainee solicitor, and the exposure and just the experience I was subject to, I could never, ever want anything different. When I moved to Brisbane, I actually went to defence personal injury, so acting for insurers, and did a lot of health law and medical negligence matters. That's where started acting for different insurers, and that included different public liability matters, and through all that was, of course, the sports-related injuries. I should say, back when I was at Butler's, though, my boss was president of the Sunshine Coast Sea Eagles. They were called Falcons and then Sea Eagles, and I think they're back to the Falcons now. But when I was there, we were actually in the negotiations for them to be a feeder team for the Manly Sea Eagles. And so that's when I really started focusing a lot on, it wasn't really called it then, but sports law type matters. There could have been judiciary issues. My boss had a big practice acting for jockeys as well with the Queensland Racing Commission. So unbeknownst to me at the time, I was kind of laying the foundation and building the networks and contacts for what would later be a sports law practice, essentially, when I did move across to Minter Ellison. And I still sat in the insurance and corporate risk group. I didn't change groups, but I just had a focus on developing their sports law practice with one of the partners who was based in Melbourne. David was known for acting for a variety of sports clubs and board issues and those types of matters, commercial negotiations. So together, I worked with him to target more specific sports clients, or perhaps clients the firm already had for employment-related matters who were clubs or sponsors, but we weren't acting for them for negotiations in the sponsorship deals. So looking to see how we could expand that practice and essentially create that full-service sports law practice, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't mind touching on that a bit more. At the top of the podcast, I called you a sports lawyer. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that title. You know, students might be listening here and thinking, yeah, I want to be a sports lawyer. I want to sit in the corporate boxes at games. I want to be next to the players at press conferences. Is that it, or is there a bit more to it than that?
So I guess if you look at my socials, particularly when I lived in Australia, that's certainly the fun highlights from it. And sure, it is great. You know, I've got experiences of being up in Brisbane, and a CEO in Sydney said, hey, come down for the Derby match. And so 4 hours later, I'm on a plane to Sydney to watch the Derby at a packed stadium and then flying back at 5 a.m. the next morning. You know, it's really fun, but it's also really tiring because that's still networking, that's still building relationships or maintaining relationships. And when you say, I get to go to these events, I get to do this type of work, that's the highlight reel. That's not the long hours, the keeping track of everything, making sure that you remember who you've spoken to, what deals could be coming up in the future, targeting the right people, because you never know what negotiations may come in the future. So it is good. Like I absolutely love it. I miss that practice so much. I miss all of the events, but I guess because of COVID, no one is really doing that at the moment. And I have been fortunate enough here in Saudi to have picked up basically where I left off in Australia with events. So I went to Argentina versus Brazil. Juventus played here as well. And I would never have seen Messi or Ronaldo play in Australia. And here I am sitting in one of the boxes in the desert, seeing them play. But back to your question about the sports law term, and you may remember that I've said this previously, sports law isn't like property law. There is not one act. Sure, there's a textbook on sports law, but it goes from employment matters to almost criminal with the judiciary issues. You've got corporate, you've got construction with the stadium builds. It's not just one area, specific area of practice. It's almost like a conglomerate of a number of fields. So it's could be compared to a general practice, so to speak. But in saying that, you still need people with specialized expertise for some matters. I'm fine doing all the corporate sponsorships, not so much these days the judiciary matters, but all of those negotiations. But when it comes to stadium builds or discrete intellectual property clauses, I still need to rely on the experts that thankfully we had at Minters because of all the different practice groups to help me negotiate or finalise those terms, because I purely don't hold that expertise. And I guess that's where we see a lot of the failings when I do have my clients come with issues. They'd stayed with their usual firm. We all know the historic relationships. They might have went to school with the lawyer or university or college, and they've been briefing them for eternity. But sports matters require a really good understanding of the industry. It can't be approached like normal negotiations or normal commercial contracts, because there are discrete issues. There's just so many facets to it, whether it be governing body requirements or individual player image rights issues. It's just not a straightforward, here's your money, we're sponsoring you, these are the KPIs, and we want a box at the game every season. So that's where I'm hoping that students understand while it's the fun practice, when you talk about it from a high level, it does require a deep understanding, not necessarily that you've played sport or have a deep interest in watching every game that's on, but just knowing those unique issues for the CEOs and the commercial officers to help your clients with those negotiations.
Do you think you touched on this at the start, do you think your first sort of summative years sort of in leaving uni and once you left uni and personal injuries and then moving to corporate law and sort of doing everything in between, do you think that's made you a better, I want to use the term again, sports lawyer?
I mean, it's really hard because there's not a measuring stick of what I can compare it to, but certainly I think my time as a junior lawyer has made me a better lawyer now. Have I been able to adapt those skills specific to a sports practice? Yes, definitely. But I've also come from a sporting background. I played sport from a young age. I've always had an interest in it. But similarly, I love business development. I love seeing new opportunities. I'm really eager to grow practices, build and cultivate those relationships. So I think it's more, a lot of the success, I should say, comes from the non-legal matters for me. It's those almost the EQ type factor rather than the IQ, to know what your clients or potential clients could want, anticipate those needs, and be able to help them in the future. And I think all that comes back to as well how you approach university. You could be the student that attends every single lecture and tutorial, which I should say you should definitely attend, no skipping classes, but you need to have that balance. You need to be, really capitalizing on the group assignments, learning how people interact, how to respond to different personalities, being part of different groups that the universities offer. I'm not sure, is Gulls still around?
Yeah.
Is that
Gulls,
still?
Yeah.
Yeah, Gulls. Okay. Yep. So being involved in that, I think is how you're going to really set yourself apart when you are actually practicing as a lawyer. If you're studying, 15 to 18 hours a day and not taking advantage of those opportunities, you might find that your interaction skills with other people or your ability to read others, which translates to client understanding, may be limited.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm hearing is it's that unique sort of intersection of both, your legal knowledge and sort of beyond that legal knowledge across a broad base of topics, as well as, emotional intelligence and sort of knowing the broad environment that teams and clubs and, everything else sort of plays in.
That's it. It's, I was not university medalist. I wasn't top of my class or anything like that. But I like to think I have had a successful career and hopefully still will have a successful career. And a lot of that comes down to, sure, knowing the law, but also having that high EQ understanding as well. And as I said before, I think that's what really separates out those who will continue to be a day-to-day lawyer. Perhaps they might inherit a practice from a partner when they become partner, as opposed to probably people with my personalities where we will build our own practice from the ground up, just really wanting to get in, make some ground movement and see what can come from the bottom up.
Mm. So building on that, you've obviously built this practice around sports law in your own professional way. How do you think you've done that? Is it a matter of saying, if a student graduates tomorrow and they go, okay, I want to be a sports lawyer, is it a matter of sort of going to seek out that work from day dot, or is it a matter of getting into the right firm and then getting in the position where you can seek out that work?
Sure. Well, there are a couple of firms in Australia which are fully focused on sports and entertainment law. So they're full service firms. I was at top tier, so I was at Minters. As I said earlier, we didn't have a straight sports law practice as such. It was part of the insurance and corporate risk group. So we were able to build on all of the different skills. So if you look at a straight insurance lawyer, they're defending PIPA claims, all of the various medical negligence matters, depending on what state you're in. They're used to going to conferences, mediations, negotiating with the other side. So they're getting those skills from there. And then if we look at judiciary matters, that's where the criminal law aspects come in. Learning how to make submissions, looking at the mitigating circumstances in court and things like that. More of a discrete part of, I guess, the sports law practice I mentioned was the construction disputes, the construction stadium builds. Do you want to set out and have a early career as a construction lawyer and then go into sports? Sure, you could, but you might not have all of the skills and contacts that you would had you been in more of a litigation type practice that I mentioned. So for the graduates that are looking to essentially do something similar to what I have done, it's a matter of getting, I think a litigation practice group would be best, but knowing the firms that do have clients in those areas. The money in sport in Australia compared to America is much, much smaller. You have what they call their equivalent of top tier firms with full service sports practices who can do, the 7 to 9 hours of billing per day solely on sports matters, because there are so many disputes. The TV rights deals are hundreds of millions of dollars. The player contracts alone are hundreds of millions of dollars per year. In Australia, some of our top marquee players are only on half a million. There's a big difference. So I think if you want to solely have a sports law practice, it might take some time for that, because you wouldn't be hitting your 7.0 billables per day solely on sports related matters unless you were in a litigation or a big dispute. So I think if you can develop the skills across a wide range of areas, but have that understanding of the sports clients, that's where you will see success. And the benefit now, compared to when I started practice in 2007, is that we have a much more developed internet. We have LinkedIn now. All the best lawyers lists, the chambers listings show which firms are ranked in the top tier and underneath for the sports law practices. So grads can actually target that. But I do want to caveat by saying, when I mentioned earlier that I'd met my future boss at a football match, the conversation I had with him was that I do not want to do criminal law. I never want to be a criminal lawyer. I can't see myself doing that. 10 days later, I'm appearing in court asking for my first adjournment for it was a public nuisance matter. So nothing, really high level or, a big outcome, so to speak. But I loved my criminal law practice. When I was a student, I didn't want to do that. So you don't want to focus too much as a student on, I want this area or I don't want this area, because I guess I'm living proof that no, I'm never doing criminal law, to, hey, this is actually a really good practice. I'm now duty lawyer qualified. I'm getting to help a wide range of people. I'm learning so much about the court system. I'm developing wider relationships with the prosecutors and, different barristers and things like that. So when you are at university, take advantage of the clerkships so you can rotate through different practice groups, because you might find that while you thought you were going to be a litigator and eventually go to the bar, every time you go to court or even assisting with different court documents, you've realized actually this isn't the type of law for me. I'm more transactional, or I'm more of an advice lawyer. So I mean, I've never done a straw poll, but I don't know how many people from university who said, I want this area of law, have actually ended up practicing in that, save for, I want to be a corporate lawyer, which is a very general term and can encompass a wide variety of practice areas. So just say, of course, I want you all in sports law. I think it's fantastic. I'm #1 advocate for that. Just be careful setting your sights on it when you haven't stepped foot in legal offices yet or actually experienced those matters, because what I have on my socials is very much the highlight reel. All of that networking and long hours, especially when it's daylight savings and you're flying from Brisbane to Sydney and Melbourne in a day, you're getting very little sleep and you invariably end up sick afterwards because of all the travel and just having to be on and engaged with these people.
So you're telling me you're not just watching one game, watching the other game, and just never touching your computer ever as a sports lawyer?
Well, no, yeah. I mean, we used to joke that I was barely at my desk in my office. And, I was so grateful for a really fantastic secretary. We had color-coded calendars, so she knew where I was. And if I was, at a lunch catch up with friends, or if I was doing something for WLAQ, or if I was doing a networking, while I might be out of the office for a long lunch, which is absolutely amazing and so much fun, I still have to make up those billables at some stage during that 24-hour period or that 7-day week. So I was finding a lot of my work was being done, a Saturday morning or a Sunday afternoon in the office, just really pushing out a few billable hours to make up for, the fun time from throughout the week.
Yeah, awesome. So if you were a first year student again, what advice would you give yourself if you were just starting from day dot?
Okay, yes, this one, I've had a long time to think about it because I've been practicing for a while now. And it would be, don't be too eager to race through university. And what I mean by that is take the time to go to class, get to know your fellow students, be involved in events, get involved in the clubs. Not everything, because you still need to have a balance and you still are a student. But for me, I worked so much and I was just in such a race to start practicing. I didn't enjoy my time as a student like I should have. I mean, I very much enjoyed my time as a student. I absolutely loved college life. I'm not sure what, is still on campus at Nathan at the moment, but we'd go down to Cafe Internet after class and, share a bowl of chips. But I was like, no, I need to go to work now. So I'd race off and I didn't have that chance to just socialize with my fellow students. And I really wish I did that. I don't regret studying as a law clerk in my last year of uni, but that was 4 days a week. So I was commuting up to the Sunshine Coast and just not spending as much time at university as I should have. I mean, it's all worked out well now. I probably would have got even higher grades had I concentrated more on uni in the last 2 years. But I was just, no, I need to get into a law firm. I need to do this. I need to be admitted. And I should have just slowed that down a little bit. So I think no one will ever find a perfect balance. I think that's just something that just doesn't exist in the world. But I would really like students to enjoy their time, because the law firms are always going to be there. The clerkships are always going to be there. You've got time to do that, but you can't redo university undergrad. That's not something you can go back to.
Yeah, I'm sure that's good advice for all of our students starting trimester 2 again. Maybe stop and smell the roses a bit more.
That's it, and actually enjoy being in class. I mean, we didn't have recorded lectures when I was at university, and while I don't think I'm old as such, but when I remember we were some of the first ones to actually have laptops in class, and they were 2-3 inches thick, and we were all lining up in the back row of the lecture theatres so we could use the PowerPoints, because the batteries only lasted over an hour and a half, which wasn't enough for lectures. There was no PowerPoints a lot of the time. It was, they were called, I think, UHTs, which is this clear plastic thing that teachers can write on, and it projects up onto the screen, and then they can wipe it off and start again. I remember that's how I learned torts law. So while you could miss a class and listen to it later online, you're not getting that interaction. And I'm talking about pre-COVID times, because I'm not sure of the current arrangements with in-class attendance. But you really do. I'm grateful that I've kept in contact with people I went to university with, because some of them aren't in law anymore and they're potential clients. So it's those relationships from, 15, 20 years ago now, which sounds so long, that's, really beneficial now as a practicing solicitor.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Cassandra, so much for coming on the podcast. I'm sure that was a really great advice for, all students, whether or not they want to sort of think about sports law or they just wanted to get through their degree one way or another. So thank you so much. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time's Law Student Podcast.